Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Beer and Broadband, the podcast where we try to inspire, entertain, and of course, enjoy some beer while talking about broadband. We are live from Mountain Connect in Keystone, Colorado, and for this episode, we've got two outstanding guests. To my far right, we have Mr. Bryson Ward, and to my closer right, we have Ben. Actually, it's Ramirez.
Lewis-Ramirez.
Right? Ben Lewis-Ramirez. My apologies. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on here. There's a lot going on at this conference. There's a lot to talk about in the broadband world. Why don't we first start off with introductions? Have you each just tell us a little bit about yourself, what company you represent, and then we'll jump right into conversation.
Yeah, I'm Bryson Ward with Bonfire Engineering and Construction, VP Operations. Run the engineering and construction team, and happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryson.
My name is Ben Lewis-Ramirez. I work for HR Green, a 109-year-old employee-owned multidisciplinary engineering firm. My role is to oversee all the feasibility and planning work that our firm does for public clients for Colorado and West. So I oversee the Western U.S. for all those efforts.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, obviously, having two engineering firms here, there's a theme to this conversation, to this episode, and it is, of course, trying to talk a little bit about how important engineering is to the broadband development that we have going on, not just in Colorado and not just in the municipalities around here, but all across the United States. So, first of all, I'll ask the easy question. What are you guys most excited about being here at Mountain Connect?
Yeah, I think just, obviously socializing with, a lot of people that we work with, right? They're trying to understand some of the new technologies that are out, in the industry and, trying to learn more, really, right? With our industry's ever evolving and so just trying to.
It's like broadband. It's getting faster, right?
Yeah, it's getting faster. Oh, that is true. So, yeah, that's.
Yeah, and so for me, this is my first in-person event, broadband event, certainly to attend, post-pandemic. So it's great to get back out and kind of see the familiar faces and all those kinds of things. But probably what I'm most excited about just is this time and place in the industry. There's so much money being made available at all levels, local, state, and federal, to facilitate broadband deployments. So there's a real energy this year to the conference because, in past years it's always been like, well, what can we do? How can we pay for it? And now we have the money. Let's go build some stuff. And that energy is palpable.
Awesome. Well, obviously, you can have money, but you have to have a design and you have to have a network in order to deliver broadband, right?
That's
Which
right.
is why I'm no engineer, obviously, but engineering is critical to it. So let's talk a little bit. Technical, right? So all the people that are getting the funding now, why is engineering so important to this process versus just like, hey, just go out there and I'm just going to just deploy the network however I can, the fastest I can, whether it be fiber, wireless, whatever. Why should the municipalities and all the people, the recipients of the funding, why should they care about engineering?
It's a great question. I can go first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, it comes down, I think, to a matter of value. Just because there's an enormous amount of funds available via grants and whatnot, we still need to make sure that money is spent efficiently. And so the value that proper engineering can bring to a project, accurate estimation of what your cost and level of effort is going to be right out of the gate. And that helps, every step of the way, whether you're a private entity who's trying to justify from a business perspective whether or not it makes sense to do business in a certain community, or you're an elected official who's considering, putting an initiative on a ballot, to pay for it via bonds, or if you have to opt out of SB 152, having as much detailed information ahead of time on your costs, your construction schedule, all of those things can be really helpful. Not to mention, with everybody trying to build broadband, there are supply chain shortages to contend with, and so having your network designed and engineered in as detailed a way as possible, as early as possible in your project, can help make sure that you stay on track, you know how much you're going to spend, you have transparency to whoever your stakeholders are, and so on.
So all those things that were all the things to build the network are stuck on the ship that was it Evergreen that was blocked the Panama Canal.
Yeah.
That was
Suez Canal.
Suez Canal. All right.
Right.
Bryson, what do you think?
Yeah, so I guess, similar perspective, really what drives what needs to be on the print is, the permitting agency. So, it's really identifying those needs up front, right? Because, that engineering starts that process, right? So if you don't understand all the requirements up front, what has to go on the print, then by the time you go through, the actual permit submittal and trying to get the project kicked off and going, a lot of times there'll be hurdles after the fact. So it's obviously super important early on, to really understand what type of project you're building, right? The jurisdictions that you're working with, and making sure that, at the end of the day, the engineering print's constructible, right? And that the project can be done timely. And then I guess the other piece is just, understanding, what building more or less future-proofing the network, right? Like when you're engineering it, not just thinking about the needs today, but thinking about, the fiber optic needs that are going to be needed not just for tomorrow, but the future generations.
So let me ask you guys this: you're both, you're obviously engineers. You understand the technology. I'm sure most of, like all of us, we have iPhones, we have all these devices. We think about Internet of Things, right? We think of all the different things that could happen. So on the note of future-proofing, what do you, like, when you're thinking about a design, what do you have to consider when you're thinking that today we have home automation, we have, Alexa and Amazon, in all of our house, I'm sure I'm going to get targeted by something soon just by talking about this, but, we're all over the place. So from a design perspective, when you say future-proofing, what does that really mean?
Sure, despite the fact that he was the one that talked about this, I'm gonna jump
Slide
in.
in,
Anyway.
slide
Jump right in. Jump right in.
It's like a beer, it just goes down easy.
So, in addition to the stuff you mentioned, the Internet of Things, all of the connected devices that we increasingly have in our homes, there's, from a municipal perspective, you might want to wire up your traffic signals in the future. You might want to wire up gunshot detection sensors. You might want to provide small cell backhaul. So all of those kinds of things, whether or not those initiatives exist in your community yet, they certainly will in the near future. And so designing on two fronts, spare capacity in your cables themselves to make sure you have sufficient fiber strands to serve all of those diverse use cases that you might have for the network, but also spare conduit. So that, the hitherto unimagined shiny things can be attainable in the future as well.
Yeah, I agree. It's really, like I said, planning for today and the future. But when you're laying a network out, like I always say, most expensive part is getting the initial structure built, right? So sizing the fiber appropriately, getting conduits, extra spare ducts, micro ducts in that trench. You then have essentially an asset in the ground that, that you could use for future fiber if say you did need to extend more fibers, in the future. You could lease those ducts out. It just gives you, lots of options for future proofing. But main goal is getting the fiber built, farther out in the network.
Do you think people underestimate the complexity of, obviously broadband, money, connectivity, digital divide, we're obviously all fans of these things, but we've in a mass media perspective, we've simplified this. And do you believe that because of that, people do have a more simplistic view of what it really takes to design a network to the scale that you guys are talking about?
100%. Yeah, it's really complicated, and it really behooves you to have some subject matter expertise on your side because there's so many angles to consider and technologies to evaluate and operational models to look at, and yes, it's very complicated.
Yeah, and then, I mean, I think a lot of people think, just laying the fiber out is okay, just go off of Google Maps, and
Yeah.
it's just more than that. Like I said earlier, with understanding the permitting requirements and like that, and just to get the fiber built, but then keeping up with the electronics, right? Like everything that ties on to both ends of the fiber,
Yeah.
it's technology, right? And it's always evolving, always changing. So our industry's, you're learning something new every day,
Yeah.
more or less.
Yeah, another kind of value add from engineering, and a piece of the complication that rarely gets considered, is how you'll get sort of broader connectivity back to a point of presence. You can build the most awesome state-of-the-art network in small-town America, but if you don't have backhaul back to the internet, and if you don't incorporate those costs into your planning, you can be several $1 million in the red just by, at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We see there's such big numbers thrown around about funding, but the reality is, like, it is not an inexpensive thing, and it's not an inexpensive proposition to build a network and to build it in the way that is future-proofing, that is allowing all of these things, from both the backhaul to all the way to full penetration, or even majority penetration in a neighborhood or community. So let's talk about real quick about permitting. So that's come up a couple of times. So I think you guys can agree that permitting is if it was a three-legged stool, it's a key pillar of the stool that make sure things stay up. What should people know about permitting, or what do they underestimate about the permitting process that maybe you could share and some insight to?
It's longer and more complicated than you think. and again, to bring it back to the value of having proper engineering on your project, something as simple as doing a design that avoids railroad crossings, because those are incredibly costly and time consuming to get the permits to go under or over a railroad. And it can be cheaper, to place a few thousand feet more fiber than deal with a railroad crossing. So the permitting aspect.
I was having this vision of, like, who's the always got run over by the train, the Roadrunner, and
Wile E. Coyote, yeah,
and the
yeah.
train. Yeah, so.
Right, and then and then you get into whether to design your network buried or aerially, and who owns the poles, and what the attachment process is going to be, and that permitting piece on the aerial side of things. I mean, you might have to wind up going in and replacing poles. You might have an incumbent provider who's not very happy and willing to play ball with you. So the permitting side is absolutely critical, and it should not be underestimated, because it can really add a lot of cost to a project if you don't consider it up front.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the challenges are coming from just the fact that, our right-of-ways where we place our utilities now are a lot more congested than they were in the past. So it's not like, now you have 3-4 fibers in that right-of-way with gas and sewer, electric. And so, a lot of municipalities and permitting agencies, they're trying to mitigate the risk of, a line getting hit. So like some of the things we're having to do now is the SUE law, for example, subsurface utility engineering law. We're actually having to go out and pothole all these existing utilities now. So It's actually a construction step to locate the facilities. Then we have to bring that data back, add it to the engineering prints, so that on the print we're actually showing, a plan and profile view of where all that existing utilities are in the right of way before we move forward with the construction permit. So that adds complexity, adds time, adds cost, but those measures are being enforced because of the tight right-of-ways that we're dealing with now. So it's
kind of the go slow to go fast approach, right? Like, make sure you're doing it the right way to get it done in an efficient manner.
Yes. Yep.
Interesting. All right. Well, obviously, lots of things to think about from a network engineering perspective. I'd like to you guys each to kind of do the way we do these. We always do parting thoughts. So kind of what's your guys' parting thought as you go out the next couple days here at Mountain Connect? And again, if there's something you feel like you want to share, or just let us know. But we want to really think about it. This is what happens when you're at an event, guys. We have noise. We have live noise. Anyway, if you have any parting thoughts about engineering, about any tips or insights, or any just good humor that you want to share before we wrap this short episode of Beer and Broadband. We'll start with you, Ben.
Yeah, just if you're a municipality out there that's considering putting out an RFP or an RFI, or just starting down the process of evaluating your options, don't confine yourself to solely accepting responses from service providers. Very often there are engineering firms out there that monitor those bid sites and might have an innovative option for you to consider. So whenever you're putting out an RFP or an RFI, to begin that process, just be as open with that request as you can, because very often there are engineering firms who have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of deployments, and really have the knowledge to guide you in the right way. Being kind of open to that out of the gate by having your RFI, RFP, RFQ really geared towards flexible responses. My parting thoughts.
Awesome. Bryson.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a process, and I guess just understanding, if you need that help on, all right, where do we start? Like, where do we even start from, right? And we enjoy, getting involved early on, even during the feasibility study, and just really trying to walk the customer through what this looks like, right? From just that feasibility through planning, through engineering, what the permitting process looks like, all the way down to construction, and then at the end of the day, you have lit service, right? And so just it is a process, and it's important to understand, because I mean, there's a lot of people out there that make it sound easier than it is, and so I guess that's where I want to leave. And then with Mountain Connect, just getting like I said earlier, just finding new tools to use, partners that we can lean on to help support us from an engineering services standpoint, and just looking forward to shaking some hands.
Awesome. I know we haven't done that for a couple of years now. It feels good to be live and in person for these again.
Indeed.
So, gentlemen, I thank you both. I think some of the insights, obviously, just to recap, it's a process. Have a plan. It is more complicated than you really think, and at the
Trust
end,
the experts.
Yeah, and truly, if to all the folks that are getting the funding, realize you do need help. And I think, like with all things in life, you build a team, right? And you get things done by working with teams. And I think it goes no different to building a broadband network. You enlist, if you're trying to lose weight or get in shape, you hire a coach or you hire somebody. It's the same thing. You're trying to get the right people in the right place to deliver it. So, gentlemen, thank you, Bryson, Ben, for attending this Beer and Broadband episode. For those listeners, let's cheers.
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 And I thank you, and you can catch us on Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts. Thanks again, and we will see you next episode.